30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And the mic's muted. The mic's muted. Sure, why not? Why not? What's up, Bills Mafia? Z-Bot here. Monday night, I'm not. So have you? Oh, I can't take this anymore. I physically, mentally, I just cannot take this any longer. I don't know how you guys feel. I don't know where you're at with it. This is killing me. It is killing me. It's amazing I'm still alive. It is amazing that I am still alive, but I'm glad I am. And I'm glad you are too. And I'm glad you're joining me here on the Smoke Break Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel. Well, yesterday was something else. Yesterday was something else. It's one of those games. It's 2 games in a row. It's truly 2 games in a row that you're not going to forget for a long time. And both for the wrong reasons. I mean, you get 2 classics back to back. You get 2 absolute classics back to back. And they're both on the losing end. It's the most Bills thing ever. You get 2 absolute instant classics and the Bills are on the losing end. And usually when it's an instant classic, that means it's a gut churner, right? An absolute heartbreaker for somebody. And the Bills fan base, including all of us, have their heart broken both times. And, I don't know if anybody here has been through a breakup, a really bad one. You got dumped, whatever. Luckily in my life, I haven't got dumped. And I think my sweet love, Caroline, is watching right now. And if she is, we've been together for 6 years. Please don't leave me, Caroline. It's the last thing I need right now. But if Caroline decided to leave me, and God bless her, after the years of her just having to sit back and watch me be an emotional wreck because of this football team, it's amazing she hasn't yet. But she hasn't. And if she did, however, the point I'm getting to is I could imagine this is what it would feel like. And it's amazing because when you are a football fan, especially if you're a fan like we are, and there's tears of being a football fan, right? There's tears. There's tears. Not tears coming down your face. Maybe that'll happen later on in the show. It happened last night. Or maybe it didn't. I don't know. It did in my mind. I was crying in my mind. But there's tears to this. And from what I can tell, the majority of Bills fans, and I know almost all of you, there's a reason you tune in here every week to watch me. It's because you're a diehard fan. You're not a casual fan. You're not somebody who checks the score the next morning. Oh, man, Bills overtime. What a heartbreaker. Off to work. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if you just didn't give a shit? Wouldn't your life just be infinitely better? But no, here we are. We are in a relationship with this team. And it is a roller coaster of a relationship. And it seems that week in and week out in this relationship, our hearts get ripped out of our chests. Ripped out of our chests. And yesterday is the best example possible of literally having your heart broken. And if I were to ever get dumped, if any of you have ever been dumped, I can't imagine. I have to imagine this is exactly what it feels like. I sat there as the Bucs run off into the night, touchdown, game's over. You just sit there and your body, it goes numb. Everything goes numb. Tunnel vision. It's kind of like that Seinfeld episode, The Contest, the most classic episode. Everybody knows it. And they're, George, Jerry, Kramer, they're staring at the naked girl out of the window of the apartment. Elaine walks in. And everybody in the window is so infatuated with the naked woman that Elaine says, I'm going to Mars. And I think George turns around and says, have a good time. Nothing's real. When you're that locked in, nothing's real. And you're so locked into this game. You're riding in a million different bumps and loops and corkscrews on the roller coaster of whatever yesterday was. And it comes to a screeching halt. And nothing else around you is real. You're just stuck in a purgatory of darkness and sadness, numbness. And it doesn't go away awfully quick. Here I am. We're over 24 hours. And my whole day's been awful. It's been an awful day. And 90% of that is because of yesterday, right? Throw in a little dash more from the remnants of whatever last week was on Monday night. It all just kind of combines together into one big pot of absolute sadness. And just when you think it can't get any more intense and just depressing, yesterday happens. And the reason it was even worse yesterday is because the game was over. The game was over. So let's start there. Out of the chutes. And look, going into this game, you knew my thoughts. I'm sure the majority of you felt the same. I had no confidence in this game. I tweeted out a video. I photoshopped my face over Peter Griffin from one of my favorite scenes from Family Guy. And essentially, it's Peter saying, I'm going into this situation with absolutely no expectations, and hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised. And that's exactly how I thought about that game. I had zero expectations in regard to the Bills. Did not expect them to win that game. Frankly, I did not expect it to be awfully competitive the way that they've been playing. I just truthfully didn't. I felt that when you looked at those two teams on paper, where did the Bills really match up with the Bucs? The Bucs have an elite offense, an elite defensive line, an elite weaponry on their offense with a hurt Tre'Davious White. So it's almost impossible to cover their entire arsenal of weapons. They have the greatest quarterback of all time. They're at home. They're coming off of a Super Bowl victory. They're humming as of late. Brady's going to win the MVP. They have a great run game. They have a tremendous ability to stop the run. Just every increment that you would look at when comparing the two teams on paper almost favored Tampa Bay. And truthfully, I just don't know how you could have compared the two teams going in and had any real confidence in the Bills winning the game. Now, when I say I didn't think it would be competitive, I don't mean to say I thought it was going to be a blowout. I just didn't really think the Bills were going to be in the game. They might lose by 10, something like that, but it never really felt like they were on the same level as the Bucs. The first half was way worse than that. It was an absolute dismantling. The Bucs were outclassing the Bills in every phase of the game. It didn't even look like the Bills belonged out on the field with Tampa Bay. The defensive line of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were getting in through the offensive line of the Bills within milliseconds. Josh Allen was running for his life the second he took the snap, every snap. They could not move the ball. They could not run the ball. And because of that, they did not run the ball. And trying to get something going in that department, they run the living hell out of Josh Allen. We'll get into that in a bit. But they were trying whatever they could with what they have at their disposal. What they have at their disposal is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and that's about it at this moment in time. That's what their offense consists of. It consists of Josh Allen, and that's about it. And Tampa Bay was well aware of this, and all they did was absolutely send the dogs at Josh Allen, and nothing was working. Because when you know what's coming, it's awfully easy to keep a team in check. On the other side of the ball, Tampa Bay can do it all. They can run, they can throw, and that's exactly what they did. And it seemed as though every single possession that Tampa Bay had in the first half, they wound up in the red zone like that. I'm talking instantly. You'd blink and they were in scoring position. It just didn't seem like it was ever going to be competitive. It never seemed like it was going to be competitive. But that's what makes the Bills, right? There's always a reason to believe. And that's why after decades of just nothingness, of really no reason to hang on other than being in a relationship with this team that you can't let go of. I mean, think about it. The 20 years prior to last year, what kept us around other than our insane love for the Bills with no explanation as to why you have that love? They don't win. It's just, it's so tough to explain. It literally makes you sound insane. And throughout those years, they would always give you inklings of hope. Always. And you'd always think this is the year, right? Because every year prior to the year, this was going to be the year they'd end the drought. This was going to be the year they'd win a playoff game, et cetera, et cetera. It was always something. It's always something. In this game, it was no different. You're down and out. There's absolutely no reason to believe this team would make a comeback. And there it was. And they get your hopes filled all the way back up. They fill the tank. The belief. The Buffalo Bills fan base belief, spelled with a B-I. Not a B-E. There it is. The belief again. And you make it 24-10. All right, whatever. You got one in. You score again. You get the stop. Next thing you know, you're thinking they're going to win this game. And that's what's the toughest thing about being that's the toughest thing about being a fan of this team is you're never losing hope, even when hope seems completely lost. And oftentimes it just winds up compounding the problem. I truthfully I wonder how I would have felt yesterday, because by the time halftime had come around, I had accepted defeat. I had just accepted the loss. And by then I was pretty much okay with it. Right? I was accepting the fact that what was happening was right around what I thought would probably happen. And it's not until you see them take the game to overtime and then lose that your emotions completely flip. You were okay with what you had saw. And when I say okay, no, you weren't thrilled with it, obviously, but you had accepted it, right? You had accepted what you have seen, and it was going to be that. There was really no way to reverse it until it got reversed. And then your emotions get completely reversed, just to go back down even a notch lower than where you already were in the first half. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely remarkable. So if you're looking at the grand scheme of things when it comes to this game, easily one of the biggest heartbreakers I've ever been a part of with this team. And there's a litany of them, right? But I just look at the amount of factors that went into this game, and how they all compile. And for it to just wind up with a loss it truly makes it right up in the top tier of the most heartbreaking losses we have ever witnessed. Super chat coming in from Jordan John. Oh, I got to get you a smoke up here, my friend. Thank you, Jordan. Can we talk about the refs, bro? I'm considering not watching the NFL anymore, not even because of the Bills, but the refs have a finger in every game this season. It's ridiculous. Jordan, hang on tight, brother. Hang on tight. We are going to get into them referees through in this show. I promise you. We are going to be getting into the referees in this show. But let's talk about the things that the Bills could control. And they couldn't control the referees in this game, that's for sure. They could control what they put out on the field. And what they put out on the field early on was a whole lot of nothing. And it reminded me a lot of what we saw against the Indianapolis Colts a few weeks ago. And that's what I tweeted this out. I go, this seems to be an NFC remake of that Indianapolis Colts game. They're getting run on. Even Tom Brady's busting off runs. There was a drive early on in the game where Tom Brady ran for 3 first downs. I'm not sure if he's ever done that in his career. I'm not sure if he's ever done that. It just seemed like they could do anything. Literally anything. When you're watching Tom Brady, who is ancient, bust off runs, you're just like, what can you do at this point? If they can do that, what can't they do? Against Indianapolis, Jonathan Taylor doing whatever he wanted, 5 rushing touchdowns. In this game, you just saw the writing was on the wall. The writing was on the wall from the get-go. And with the offense, you knew it was going to have to be completely reliant on them in that game. You could just tell. You could tell straight away the Bucs had the Bills D's number, and the Bills were going to have to put the game once again on the shoulders of Josh Allen if they wanted to get it done. Now, I had thought going into this one that the strategy should be to not run the ball. And clearly, hundreds of you were in agreement with me. Maddie Glab, the head of communications, I don't know if that's her title, but she's, you all know Maddie Glab. She does all the interviews internally for the Bills. She's one of the PA announcers at the stadium. She tweeted out, "What are the keys to victory for the Bills against the Bucs?" And I quoted it and simply said, running the ball 0 times. I think 900 of you liked that tweet. So what does that say to me? Almost damn near the entire fan base thinks the same. After what we had saw throughout the entire year, after what we had saw in the Patriots game, running the ball for this team is just not an option. And if they try to make it an option, it's just a complete waste of a play, a series, you name it. It just seems like a complete waste. And the fact that that actually wound up being what happened in this game stunned me. No designed runs to the running back in the first half, not a single one. And I was happy with it. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You cannot run the football. You got to work with what you have. Last week on Monday night for the Patriots, they ran the ball and that was it. They knew Mac Jones wasn't capable of throwing the ball in that weather. They wanted to eliminate any possible mistakes that he could make in that weather. They knew they could run the ball. They knew the Bills defense had struggled against the run. And they did exactly what they knew they were capable of doing and what they were good at. And they won the football game. The Bills, what they're good at in comparison to the Patriots is the complete opposite. Throw the ball nonstop, eliminate the run game, and try to win the football game. And what they did in the first half showed us what we legitimately did not want to see. And that is no matter what this team does, whether they run the football or whether they pass the ball exclusively, whether they do a healthy combination of both, whatever they do isn't good enough. And that was the most painful realization, I would say, yesterday. The most painful realization. Because you're thinking, well, if they just stop running the ball, perhaps they'll be completely different. Well, in the first half, they didn't have a single designed run to a running back, and they go down 24-3. And you're thinking to yourself, what if they can't run the ball and they can't exclusively throw the ball? What does that tell you? If you add that up, what's the equation equal out to? They can't do anything. And that to me is why in the first half, I just considered this game to be over. And then in the second half, you're able to establish a bit of a run game because the expectation for the Bucs quite obviously was they're not going to run it. They can't run it. So we're going to continue to play our defense the way we have. And Devin Singletary really did make the most of his opportunities in this game. I thought this was maybe Devin Singletary's best game in a very, very long time. A very long time. He took advantage of the opportunities that were given to him. I thought he was great in the pass game. And in the second half, I think he was a real big spark and a reason why the Bills offense was able to get motoring. But the only reason that run game was able to work in the second half, in my opinion, is because it was so out of left field compared to what the Bills had done in the first half, right? It was completely, they didn't do it. And so you're able to switch things up a little bit. I think that helped the Bills get down the field. But the first half, what you take away from that is just, man, I mean, this team is so easily figured out. It's almost sad. And the segment that Colin Cowherd had today on his show, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It kind of shows you two things. One, the media pundits are finally coming around to things that we've already realized weeks ago. And what we realized weeks ago is the Bills' offensive line is just never, ever in this year going to be able to give this team a chance. And this run game is never going to be competent enough to be relied on. And what Colin Cowherd said today was that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive game plan was the most disrespectful he's ever seen. He said it was the most disrespectful game plan he's ever seen because what they did was blitz and blitz exclusively. They did not respect the run game because they knew it was non-existent. They did not respect Josh Allen's ability to make decent decisions because they knew he would be under pressure so quickly and so much that he was going to not be able to have a Josh Allen elite type game. And in the first half, that game plan worked to perfection. And if any other team in the league were to execute that same game plan, the Bills just don't stand a chance. And that's exactly what Colin Cowherd was trying to get at. But the one thing he said was, you have to have a run game. You have to establish the run game, and you have to be able to get the run game going if you want to be able to compete in this league. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's good in theory. Except this team cannot do it. This team cannot do that. I mean, you're heading into the last 4 weeks of the year here. If they could have done it, they would have done it by now. This team is who they are. Point blank. It is what it is. So when you say, oh, you got to be able to run the ball. Yeah, of course you got to be able to run the ball. Wouldn't it be great? They can't do it. They can't do it. So how did they supplement that, right? Well, of course they give it to the guy who is the only person on the offense really capable of having any success in the run game, and that is Josh Allen. And before we get too negative here about the refs and the coaching and whatever, here's where you want to this is what you want to remember from this game. That performance from Josh Allen was one of the greatest I've ever seen by a QB. I don't really know what else you can say. That performance was inspiring. I mean, he was a legitimate superhero out on that field. When you think of a superhero, you think of the Spider-Man movie's coming out on Thursday. Can't wait. I already got my tickets. I'm super excited. And when you think about Spider-Man or really any superhero, what's the key element of almost any superhero movie? It's the superhero having to save everybody else. Everybody else needs to be saved by one guy because that one guy is the only person capable of saving everybody. And on this team right now, in this given moment, Josh Allen is the only person wearing a Buffalo Bills uniform who is capable of keeping this team competitive and winning games. And unfortunately, when that's the reality, week in and week out, that is not going to be consistent. It's not going to win you games. And it's just not going to be able to be relied on because when you only have one guy to rely on, it's just not sustainable. And we saw that in the first half. And that's what made his superhero type performance even more impressive. Even more impressive. You go into the half down the way you were. And my dad looked at me. He asked me a great question. When the halftime rolled around, he goes, what do you even say to this team right now? What do you even say? And I thought to myself, I don't know. I really don't know what you say. What would McDermott or anybody in that locker room say? You just got your ass kicked. You're coming off one of the most demoralizing losses I've ever seen a team suffer on Monday night last week. And now this. What do you say? And they come out and put together one of the most impressive comebacks I've ever seen a Bills team pull off, and they almost get it done. And that was 99.9% because of Josh Allen. We're talking about a performance last night from Josh Allen that was one of only 5 performances ever pulled off in the National Football League. He's one of only 5 quarterbacks to ever throw for 300 plus and run for 100 plus. It was absolutely extraordinary what he was able to do yesterday. So I think that what we can learn from that is everything we've seen from this year, everything we see going forward from this year, you cannot possibly question that kid. You cannot possibly question Josh Allen. You cannot possibly question the amount of money that he has been paid to be the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. Because right now, he is the only thing that's making us tune in every week. He's the only thing that's keeping this team remotely competitive. And could you imagine what that game would have been like yesterday with literally any other quarterback at the helm for the Bills? And I could say the same thing for the game against the Patriots. What would that game have been if the Bills didn't have a quarterback who could throw the ball through the wind, who could keep the game somewhat close in an absolute hurricane when you can't run the ball? Josh Allen. And I after I just, let the whole thing wash over me, let that game take its course through my body, my mind. I tried to tell myself the one thing I got to take from this game is that I, as a Bills fan, I could not be more pleased, more proud, any adjective, to have Josh Allen as the quarterback of this team. Truly. That game yesterday, you want to talk about a guy who just wanted it. You want to talk about a guy who wanted it more than anybody else on that field, and you're facing off against Tom Brady. There was nobody on that field who wanted that game more than Josh Allen. For Christ's sake, the guy, what didn't he do? And he wound up suffering an injury, and he still gets this team to overtime. The guy's in a boot afterwards. He's got to run the ball. He's got to run the offense. He's got to throw the ball down the field. He's got to score every single touchdown. He's got to do everything possible to keep that game close, to keep that game competitive, to try and win the football game. And I just can't help but think, if it was anybody else, what would that game have been? It would have been the first half times 2, truthfully. So I just, the loss will be remembered here. And the unfortunate thing is Josh Allen's performance will go unrecognized when it's all said and done. But I need to keep perspective at the forefront here. And what Josh Allen did yesterday was just, it was lights out. It was lights out. And a good point here being made from Scotty. If Josh Allen didn't inspire this team going forward after last night, we are really screwed. I don't know how you could be on that team and not just want to do everything possible to win for that guy. Think about it. If you're on that team and you got that guy leading you, I don't know how you wouldn't do everything in your power to get it done for him. And I think that they have that mentality. I do. But right now, I just don't know if the skill level on offense is there. I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if the coaching's there right now. I don't know if anything's there. I just don't. But I know that Josh Allen, I know that his will to want to win is higher than any I've ever seen. Honest to God. I really believe that. They could have packed that in. They could have packed that in at half. I mean, seriously, they could have just packed it in. And Josh Allen was the reason that game wound up going overtime. Let's get over to the comments here. Ahmad Math is coming in. Z-Bot, this team reminds me of the early 70s when the only great player we had was unfortunately that guy, O.J. Simpson. I hate to bring up his name, but it is what it is. It's a good point. If you go back and watch those documentaries on O.J. Simpson, yeah, at that time, yeah, O.J. Simpson was the Buffalo Bills. The thing is right now is the Bills seem to have players. The Bills seem to have players on the roster right now that would make you think that it shouldn't just be Josh Allen. But that's just the way it is, right? And Stephon Diggs can only do so much when he's your main target. You can only do so much when you can't run the ball. You can only do so much when your defense allows a 40-plus yard touchdown every single game. You really can only do so much. And on top of it all, I just don't know if the coaching staff right now is putting together a competent enough game plan to allow Josh Allen to succeed. Seriously. Let's get into that. Sean McDermott right now, I don't know how I feel. All I can say is it seems that as every game goes by, I'm starting to lose a little more trust. And that punt yesterday, in that position, was just inexcusable. I just don't know how you can, as the head coach of a football team, make the call to punt in that position when you go on Twitter and literally every person on earth watching that game had the same thought. And it was, how the hell can you punt that ball? And if that's the case, how come the guy in position to make the call is the only one that doesn't have the same mindset? It blows my mind. If everybody on earth watching that game knows that punting the ball right there is the wrong choice, how does Sean McDermott not know it? I don't get it. And then at the post game, he seemed to justify it in saying that they had an opportunity to win at the end, so the punt wound up being the right call. I don't know if that's exactly what he meant, but that's kind of how it came across. No, that game could have been completely different if they didn't punt the ball. I just, that to me was you're playing to lose at that point. Seriously, you are playing to lose. That punt was egregious on all levels. On all levels, that punt was just horrendous. And really, I wonder how the game would have panned out had they not punted it. Even if you don't get it, right? Even if you don't get it, you had the stones to go for it in a position that everybody knew you needed to. And then when you do wind up going for it, you fake a punt. Now, I was just talking about how Josh Allen is essentially a human superhero. I would much rather have the superhero trying to get me a first down than I would my punter. And I understand, okay, you're trying to implement some trickery, catch him off guard. It was awful. I'm taking the superhero every time. That's like me choosing between a superhero and a bystander on the street to get something done. Take the superhero. Because win or lose, that was your best chance to get it done. Now, I will defend them on the field goal. The early field goal where they decided to kick it instead of going for it. Why do I defend them on that? Point blank, the Tennessee Titans game. The Tennessee Titans game. You go for it there. You don't get it. You lose. Everybody's ripping on the play call, including me. I did. I hated it. I hated the execution of the play. Everything about it was awful. And McDermott and Dable got ripped for it. So did Josh Allen, the whole offense. Had they kicked a field goal there, who knows? They might win the game. The problem with those type of play calls is you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I thought right there, take the points. Take the points there. Because you haven't been in position to get any points all night. The other offense is scoring at will, it seems. Take the points. And ultimately, that decision wound up allowing them to get the game to overtime. Had they gone for it and not gotten it, that game's not going to overtime. That game's not going to overtime. They're not in a position to kick the field goal, tie it, and get to overtime. So I will defend them on that particular choice. But overall, between the game against New England, the Colts game, I don't know. It's a vibe, it seems. You don't necessarily have any. If somebody said like, oh, give me an example, you're not going to pinpoint all these different things. Yeah, of course you'll talk about, taking the punt there, or perhaps the fake punt call that I just don't see the logic in it. It just seems like this collective vibe that right now the Bills coaching staff is being outclassed by everybody else. I mean, that first half, the game plan, and Colin Cowherd his point was correct. I mean, that was a disrespectful game plan from Tampa Bay's D, but it was the right game plan. Because you're essentially saying that this opposing team in the Buffalo Bills does not have the personnel nor the coaching staff to be able to adjust to what we're going to throw at them. And all we're going to throw at them is blitz, heavy pressure, beat it. And it all came down to Josh Allen and his ability to do that. That's what it came down to. I don't necessarily know if much was done on the sidelines for that to wind up reversing. John DeMarchi coming in. 4-2 fake punt versus Josh. 4-3 at midfield punt, late third quarter. 10-0 on 3. Field goal versus TD attempt last minute. Let Josh cook. Go for it. Win or lose. Sleep well. I mean, so John, I can't tell if you're saying you wanted the Bills to go for a touchdown when they wound up kicking the field goal. I understand it. I mean, every time that these circumstances come up, there's going to be a million people on one side. There's going to be a million people on the other side. But I think when you look back at the Titans game and that outcome, and you look at the momentum the Bills had built on both offense and defense in the second half, I didn't mind taking that game to overtime. Plus, you win the toss. Things went in their favor. They just didn't get it done. Point blank. It was the right choice. It put them in a position to win the game. They had every opportunity. And you want to know what? Here's the most heartbreaking thing. You could also make the argument at the end there when you kick the field goal to tie it, because there's another example. He wound up going for the field goal again. It would have been the exact same thing that they did in Tennessee. They could have went for the touchdown on 4th down before the end of regulation to try and win the game. And they take the field goal. I think it was the right choice. but it should never have come down to that because it just seemed like they were going to score prior to fourth down. I mean, that run Josh Allen had, his foot was like a half an inch out of bounds. I mean, what an absolutely insane effort. And when you look at the replay, his foot goes out of bounds by about a half inch. And if it didn't, it would have been a touchdown. The game's over. So it never should have came down to having to kick that field goal. But why really should it not have come down to having to kick that field goal? And now we'll get into what I feel like everybody wants me to go off on. Paul Seraphin, by the way, appreciate the super chat, man. Thanks so much for watching. Look, I have a really tough time. I have a really tough time blaming refs in games. I truly do. I really think that that's a cop-out a lot of the time because oftentimes the team itself could have done things throughout the game to win. And when you're relying on calls to win you a game, I always wind up coming back to the thought process of, well, you should never have allowed it to come down to that circumstance in the first place. In this particular circumstance, I have no words. I honest to God have no words when it comes to the no calls that the Bills suffered in this game against Tampa Bay. I'm all for either calling it or not calling it. Consistency is key. And I have a great story here about this entire circumstance. I got a good friend from college. His name's Rez. Big time Tampa Bay Bucs fan. And he's from Long Island. So if you know anybody from Long Island, they're never wrong. Never wrong. Ever. They're not wrong. They're right. You're wrong. So the fade to Diggs happens on third down before they go to tie the game. Send it to overtime. And everybody in the world knows that's a DPI. Everybody. I mean, come on. Who in their right mind watches that play and thinks it's not a DPI? And my buddy Rez, you can't let the game be decided by the refs. You can't let the game be decided by them. In that circumstance, late in the game, they both seem to have their hands on each other. Final play, Bills win if it winds up, being called. You can't let it be called. You cannot possibly put the game in the ref's hands. Okay, fine. Fair enough. But guess who didn't mind? Guess who didn't mind when good old Tommy Boy got the call in overtime? My buddy Rez. And I said, oh, it's funny. It's funny. Oh, it's overtime. And any play at this point in overtime can wind up deciding the game. And the pass interference called against the Bills seemed to be way less obvious than the one that was committed on Stephon Diggs that wasn't called. But that was okay, right? That was okay. My point here is anybody who's on one side or the other needs to be realistic with themselves. And saying that the game cannot be decided by the refs is fine, except when the call is so blatantly obvious. The circumstance in which the play happened does not matter. It doesn't matter. You're telling me just because there's less than a minute left and it's third down that mauling Stephon Diggs is okay because you can't let the refs decide the game? I mean, give me a break. And it wasn't like it was the only time it happened. It wasn't like it was the only time. Stephon Diggs got held, 3 times in that game? Egregiously. None of them are called. And every single week we hear a no calls and this and that. I have never seen people react to a official's performance this poorly in my life. Nelly, the rapper, Nelly, he tweeted about it. What? I'm sorry, but if you got Nelly tweeting about how bad that no call was, what more do you need to see? You got freaking Nelly going on Twitter bitching about it. And not only that, there was multiple former NFL officials who took to Twitter to make sure that they made their voices heard and to make sure everybody knew that the NFL officials in that game got it disgustingly wrong. And if you wind up getting it wrong, fine. But how you can go to that overtime period and call that DPI on the Bills and gift the Bucs field position right near midfield, and they wind up scoring a couple plays later is absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. This game wasn't decided by the officials. The Bills were down 24-3 at one point. Okay. It wasn't ultimately decided by the officials, but they played a major role in the final outcome in the last few plays of the game. That is facts. You can't say that they ultimately decided the game because the Bills went out and sat on the bench, basically, in the first half and dug themselves a hole that they just wound up not having enough time to get out of. But you can easily, with confidence say that the late fourth quarter and overtime were manipulated by the officials. 100%. 100%. And if you need any evidence to this, just go on Twitter. Just go on Twitter. I have never seen, and I understand the Bills fans were going to be reacting to it. Of course, we have our biases. Even if it wasn't a call that was so obvious that it should have been called, we probably still would have taken it to Twitter, right? But when you got Nelly and former officials and literally everybody and their mother hitting up Twitter to talk about it, what does that tell you? It's the topic of conversation. Not Josh Allen having one of the greatest performances we've ever seen. Not Tom Brady throwing his 700th touchdown, not the Bills comeback, not the game going to overtime probably being the best game of the weekend. No, it's the refs. And I understand you're going to get that talk through the fan base. Sure, of course. It happens every week. But when you got everybody talking about it, everybody, what does that tell you? That it was complete horse shit. John DeMarchi coming back. Z-Bot, you are awesome. Oh, John, you're too kind. But what I'm saying is memo to McDermott, Godzilla is our quarterback. If Buff loses with JA-17 missing a chance to win late, I'm good. I understand. Thanks for clearing that up, John. I was back to John's point earlier. I get it. So John's in the camp of, listen, just give it to Josh Allen at all times, and he's happy with the outcome either way. I totally understand that mindset because it's back to the points I was making earlier. It's hard to argue with it. You give the ball to the best player on your team, and you accept the outcome either way. John, you're on fire tonight. Another one, baby. I really appreciate you, man. Here's the thing. 24-3 on the road versus the champs. Comeback, refs late in OT and TB12 pocket inside the 10. JA-17 rolling, and you don't go for the win on fourth after JA-17 second half. I like McDermott, but I understand the frustration. I understand the frustration entirely. And there's so much to be frustrated in this game with. I totally agree. But I got to tell you, John, I was fine taking that game to overtime. I was because it felt like with all of the momentum in that game shifting towards the Bills, I'm taking that game to overtime, I'm taking my chances, and then you win the toss. Look, the game was theirs for the taking, and they couldn't get it done. Simple as that. But listen, to wrap up on the whole ref thing, it's got to, the main point here is it's got to just be consistent. Fine, don't call it against Diggs. Terrible non-call, fine, you didn't call it. But then you can't call it against the Bills in overtime. I mean, it's just, it just seems to be common sense. And then, of course, it just gets way worse when you look at the angles after the game. Shout out to the fan, whoever it was in the stands, who took the front on angle picture of that defensive pass interference on Diggs. I don't think anybody realized how bad it really was. That's when I think people really started to sound off on it. He was getting yanked to the ground. Look, I get it. If you're throwing a fade on third down, the game's on the line, both guys are pawing at each other, going up for the ball. I understand. Don't throw the flag. But when the guy is yanking the dude down like you would yank someone with pigtails down, I mean, that's what it looked like. The jersey from Diggs is being pulled off of his chest so violently, you can see his shoulder pads. And how that's not called is just absurd. But like I said, fine, you don't call it, whatever. Sucks. Bills got shafted, head to overtime. And in that moment, you're going to call a less egregious version of that instance on the Bills in overtime? I'm sorry, man. And to have it happen, and this is what I was trying to get to earlier. when I'm talking about the list of things that really make this game one of the biggest heartbreakers ever, right there's one of them, the refs. 100%. Because if you call what should have been called, the Bills win. If you don't call what really should not have been called, which there were also referees coming in to chime off saying that the call against the Bills in overtime wasn't defensive pass interference. If you take those two things away, the game could have been completely different. Absolutely. So that's right there. The fact that Tom Brady is the quarterback on the other side benefiting from all of this and the one that winds up getting the victory here, that's another major factor on that list. The fact that the Bills would have had a 25% difference in playoff probability had they won the game. If you watch the dude on Sunday Night Football, it's awesome. I forget his name, but he goes to the touch screen and does the numbers. They would have had a 90% chance to make the playoffs had the Bills wind up getting that game done. And now it's down to, I think, 62%. So that's an absolutely massive swing. So that right there is, of course, on the list. And then to have the performance that Josh Allen has, literally sacrificing his body and to not get the victory. It's just a laundry list of things that really makes this game one of the biggest heartbreakers I've ever seen. Honest to God. It was just so tough to swallow. It was just beyond tough to swallow. Caroline, love you. Coming in. Money for a drink. Sorry for your loss. Listen, sweetheart, I don't think $4.99 is going to cut it after that one. I think we're going to need a few more bucks if we're talking about having a couple drinks after that one. So it's one of those games. I know that I think everybody was coming in here they were looking for me to just sound off like I did last week. To me, it's tough to do that after this one because you saw what they pulled off in the second half. And look, I would have absolutely hit one out of the park if the game wound up being what it was the entire first half. But it is really, really tough to absolutely rant my ass off right now after what we had saw out of this team in the second half. I mean, even out of the defense too, who really struggled. And it's just unbelievable how week in and week out now you are just expecting this team to allow anybody with a competent run game to pop one off for 40 plus and a score. You can almost pencil it in at this point. It's insane. It's insane. But even them, who had a real struggle of a first half, they hold New England. They hold Tampa in check all second half. That sack by Milano when they needed it the most, that would have been the game had the Bucs gotten a first down there. Everything came together. This team played with so much heart in the second half. In all honesty, it was the most inspiring this team has been all season, and it wound up in a loss. But think about it. That's the most inspired this team has played all year, top to bottom, that second half. So if anything, you get a loss from this, right? You do. And you saw how bad they were in the first half. And you know they're fully capable of playing that poorly again. But you get that second half, and you look at what they got going forward. If they can find a way to channel whatever came over them in that second half, they got a shot against anybody. And I understand it was a loss. And we're going to get into this in a second. We're going to get into the playoff simulator in a second, because if there's one thing that's going to make you feel good about that loss, it's this playoff simulator. I've been playing with it all day, and you'd be shocked at how little of an impact that game really had. I think that over anything outside of the playoff, the implications, it was just a heartbreaker because of all that went into the game and then the final result. I don't even think the biggest factor in regard to just feeling dead inside after that game was because of the playoff, implications. Yeah, of course it hurts. And like I just said, it was a massive swing. You'd be feeling a lot better about perhaps the 1 seed winning the division, locking in the playoffs. You'd feel a lot better if the Bills wound up winning that game. But ultimately, when it comes to just getting in, and at this point, that is all that matters. That is all that we care about at this point. I don't give a shit about the division. The 1 seed's gone. Forget about it. I mean, that seems like it's been gone for a while now. The only thing that matters is getting in. Because right now in this year, the way things have been going, anybody who gets into the dance has a chance. That's just the way it is. Unlike any other year I've seen, I think anybody who gets into the playoffs has a chance to win the Super Bowl. I really truly believe that. And I believe that on both conferences, both sides. You get in, you got a shot. You got a shot, especially in the AFC. The way things have been, I mean, the AFC week in and week out, no one's got a clue. Anybody who makes it into the playoffs, they got a legitimate shot. John Udis coming in. Why can't there be a PFF rating on calls that refs make? Bad versus good. It's all on tape and should be easy enough to grade these. That's a great point you make, John. I appreciate you bringing it up. I tweeted this out last night. And I was being 100% serious for anybody who saw it and thought I was being sarcastic. I tweeted, I got to make sure I'm quoting myself correctly here. Let me pull it up. So here we go. I said, I want Jerry Sullivan to ask the refs if they're embarrassed. I was being 100% serious. And that tweet got like 1.5 thousand likes. And I want everybody who saw it to know I was being 100% serious. The way that the NFL sets up the officiating in this day and age is just stupid. There's no other way to put it. It is stupidity. For starters, these guys aren't full-time. This is their side gig. How, when you have the most popular sport on the planet, one of the most lucrative businesses in the world, how can you put the outcomes in the hands of people who are not doing that job day in and day out as a career? I mean, for God's sakes, I forget who it was. Somebody said on a broadcast during Thanksgiving, I forget which game, one of the refs he's a rocket scientist. I think it was the Cowboys-Raiders game. The lead official is a goddamn rocket scientist. That's awesome. He's probably a very intelligent dude. Why the hell is he a referee? He's a rocket scientist, okay? Go be a rocket scientist. There should be guys hired to be refs, and that's it. How? I mean, this isn't pickup at your local rec center. This is the NFL. How stupid is this? I mean, how flat out dumb is that? Try and process that. A multi-billion-dollar league who's only getting more popular and whatever else. The outcomes aren't necessarily determined by the refs, but they have a massive, massive play in how games pan out. Their calls can be the difference between victory and defeat, like we just saw yesterday. And you're not going to have a crew of guys whose only job is to make sure that those calls are made accurately and that the integrity of the game is always top priority. No, let's get the rocket scientist on his day off on a Sunday to come ref for a couple hours. Dumb. The other thing is these guys aren't held accountable for jack shit. You can make a horrendous call, a horrendous non-call, hop in your car and head home to your wife. Hey, honey, dinner ready yet? My day was fine. Absolutely screwed the Bills out of a win. Helped my good old boy Tom get another one. Business as usual. Smells great, love. Can't wait to dive in. They don't have to answer to anybody. I mean, you got coaches, players, owners sometimes. They're getting grilled by the media. Yet the guys who, after that game, at least in the Bills game, who clearly seem to have one of the bigger impacts on the game, perhaps more than the players and the coaches, they're at home eating a steak dinner with their wife, talking about their plans for the rest of the week. How is that possible? That ref should be at a podium, and Jerry Sullivan should be able to look him right in the eye and say, are you embarrassed? Are you embarrassed that right now you have hundreds of thousands of people online talking about how bad you are at your job? You have 100,000 people plus online talking about right now how you completely screwed your job up today and ultimately wound up screwing up potentially a season for a team. You screwed a game up completely. Are you embarrassed? I know I would be. I mean, imagine your job, right? We all got jobs. Imagine your job. You screw up your job so badly that it winds up completely altering whatever you're working on, a project, fill in the blank. You imagine doing that and you just clock out and head home? Boss doesn't care. Yeah, he'll get it next time. Pat in the back, see about, hey, you tried your best. I know you just utterly fucked it up. You completely ruined everything we were trying to do here. But hey, get him next time, right? Oh, man. Imagine a world. Just imagine it. Imagine if everybody in the workplace had as much impunity as these NFL referees do. The other great thing is, oh, yeah, do you think we were making as much as those guys? Sure. Yeah. No, we're not. No, I promise you. Anybody in this chat, I promise you, you're not making as much as these guys. Promise. Yet you're held to a much higher standard than these guys. Makes sense, right? Makes sense. Make it make sense. These guys should be held accountable, just like everybody else in this world. Yet, once a week, it seems, and it's funny too, doesn't it seem like this year, even more so than ever, the refs have just been terrible? I mean, I feel like you hear about it nonstop. I think it's been, the implementation of cracking down on the taunting, the overemphasizing on roughing the passer, the inability to figure out what the hell pass interference is. It's all kind of culminating into just an utter shit show, week in and week out. And these guys are they're not held accountable. They're not held accountable. How can you have a call that's so bad that you are trending online and you can just walk out of the building and wash your hands of it? I don't get it. I do not get it. I mean, if you had, take it like this. If Matt Breida, the awful handoff exchange against New England. I mean, we've never seen anything like it, truly. I mean, he was taking that. Somebody tweeted at me and Rico. It was absolutely hilarious. I forget exactly who it was. But they said that Matt Breida was taking that handoff like he was accepting communion at church. Okay. Now imagine that exact play happened, but it was at the end of the game. The Bills could have won, and they wound up losing because of it. Matt Breida would have gotten tarred and feathered. He would have gotten destroyed by everybody. Everybody online, the media, you name it. Matt Breida would have gotten absolutely torched because it was his fault, right? He made an inexcusable play, and he made a terrible mistake, wound up altering the game. He's going to have to answer for that, right? Just an example. Yet the referee, who's got a very similar impact on the outcome of a game, like a turnover would be, he does not have to answer to anything. And that, to me, is the biggest problem here. Because this is going to happen. It's happened forever. For God's sakes, if you listen to WGR, it was absolutely hilarious. Somebody called in to Shope and the Bulldog post-game last night, and they brought up an example of poor officiating on Andre Reed in a DPI. I think it was 1992. And I felt so bad for the guy. They hung up on him, and they were just ripping on him. But the point here is, yeah, this has been happening since the 90s and well before that. It's going to continue to happen. But what needs to happen when this does happen, because you cannot eliminate human error. And Bruce Nolan, I'm sure you all know him, you all follow him, a terrific content creator for the Bills community. He tweeted out, you're much more likely to have human error affect a football game than a massive collusion of people conspiring together to fix these games. Because everything you saw online was the NFL is rigged, games fixed. They're trying to set up Brady versus Belichick in the Super Bowl. I mean, come on. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a good conspiracy theory. They're very entertaining. I love them. I can't get enough of them, truly. And sometimes it makes you wonder, truly. It really does. But he made an amazing point. And that is, give me a break. I mean, you think that the guy who can't make an accurate call is intelligent enough to conspire with a bunch of other people who can't do that job well either, to uphold a secret that big? No, it's just not. It's not true. The one thing that has to happen here, though, there needs to be some sort of reform. It's obvious. There needs to be an immediate reform following this season to try and get this shit under control, because it is a week in and week out problem. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar product here in professional football. If there's anything that is that big of a blemish on the game, it needs to be corrected yesterday. Yet year after year after year, it just seems like nothing's been done. If there's one thing that they can do, it is put these guys in a position to answer for their calls, to answer for it. Everybody else has to. Everybody else has to. Everybody. Except for the guy that made the call. Make it make sense. Right back with you after a quick word from our friends over at NordVPN.
What up, Buffalo fanatics?
Wrong one. I know you guys absolutely all hate that one. NordVPN.
Are you out of market, but the NFL Sunday ticket is just too expensive? Hey, this is Pierre the Kingpin from the Buffalo Fanatics, and do we have a deal for you? Watching all NFL games live while having the ability to watch the replay whenever you'd like is what makes the NFL Sunday ticket so popular. The issue is the pricing is just outrageous. Getting DAZN along with NordVPN will cut that price in half. Here are the details. Go to supportbf.com and sign up for DAZN. Then go back and sign up for NordVPN. Once done, just switch your VPN to Canada and sign into DAZN. Now sit back and enjoy some football. It's the Kingpin, and I'm out.
You know the drill by now, the bfvpn.com. Get over there and take advantage of that awesome deal. So that was my rant on the refs. And this is my opinion on that is no different than it would have been yesterday prior to that game. I felt this way well before the Bills got hosed, well before, because it's affecting the game we all love. I mean, and the other thing too is, you know what's funny? It doesn't seem to be as much of a problem in college football. Why? Is there something that we can learn from them? I have no idea. I really don't. John, dude, love you tonight, brother. You're absolutely killing it. Everyone hates us. Refs hate us. Fate hates us. Our own fans hate us week to week. Here's the Disney ending. Bills win the Super Bowl. Send me up, John. Hell, I already bought tickets to a Disney movie this week. Spider-Man No Way Home. Can't wait. I'd be first in line for that ticket. Jeff King, my brother, thank you for popping in tonight. I have been pissed. Jeff, you're already just nailing it. I don't even need it. Dare I even read more? I have been pissed for the last 5 games simply because I've been a fan for 44 years and I don't know how much time I have left on this earth. Just want one Super Bowl, but yesterday I was very proud of them. I saw heart. A lot to unpack there, Jeff, and everything was great about what you just said. For one, you know what? None of us know how much time we have left on this earth. None of us, not a single one of us. And I think everybody wants what you want. No doubt about it. I can tell by what you're talking to me, what you're saying here, Jeff. I can tell by what you're saying. You're older than I am, certainly. But even though I'm 24, you're however old any of you are in here, there's one thing for certain. None of us know how much time we have left. There's another thing that's for certain. We all want to build Super Bowl. I think there's another thing that's for certain on what you said here. You were proud of them. I, too, am proud of that team yesterday, Jeff. 100%. You said you saw heart. That's another fact. I saw heart, too. And like I mentioned earlier in this show, even though it was a loss, you could argue that was the most impressed I've been with this team all season long. Because that game could have easily have been 45-7 or 45-13, something like that. And I honest to God thought that was what it was going to be. I mean, sorry, sue me. But God bless you if you thought that what happened yesterday was going to wind up happening. You would have been a madman to think that after what they put out on the field in the first half, that they were going to wind up making a comeback like that. Good for you. I say this every week. There's always an example. God bless you if you're the guy who has that optimism, because I am not that guy. I don't know many people who are. And frankly, I don't know how the hell you could be like that. Seriously. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing how different the human brain can be between human to human. I couldn't even understand how you could possibly have that mindset. And the fact that they wound up doing what they did, despite the losing effort, a lot of heart and a lot of reason to be proud, for sure. Another reason to not just ruin your own life thinking about this game nonstop is the playoffs and what's ahead of us. And the fact that game really, despite it seeming like the world fell afterwards, the outcome that it is going to wind up having on the playoffs, you're going to be shocked when we get into this simulator here. It's not as bad as you think. Back to John. John, my brother, you are just nailing it tonight. What if in the playoffs, Buffalo's 7 seed beats Tennessee, New England, Tampa Bay, and Tom bleeping Brady and settles all scores like Michael Corleone? I'm just saying, wow. You want to talk? Now, there's your Disney movie, John. Now, there's a script that writes itself. You wouldn't even need to hire a team of writers to get a blockbuster Disney movie in itself right there. The Bills squeak into the 7th seed of the playoffs, beat 3 teams that beat them in the regular season to cap it all off by beating the guy who has owned them for decades. It would just be, sports are better than movies, truly. Sports are movies that you can't script, and that would be better than any sports movie ever made, honest to God. Oh, and I haven't even touched on this, but, the reason I haven't really is because I'm not awfully concerned about it, but it's something to talk about, of course. Josh Allen really did lay his entire body out on the line, and, of course, he winds up in a boot afterwards. What we're hearing is that he's got a sprain down on his ankle, and it's not nearly as bad as what it potentially could have been. And so he's got a sprain on his foot, and it will be day to day for Josh Allen, according to Sean McDermott. So, that tells me he's playing this weekend. It tells me it's not anything incredibly serious. But what it does tell you is, I've been saying this for weeks. If you're going to have to rely on Allen the way that they did yesterday, this is going to be a common occurrence. He is going to get hurt. Even though I think he is a real-life superhero, he does not have the ability to not get hurt like some superheroes. Forgot. And, you know what happens to him. It happens to the best of them. And if you're going to continue to have Josh Allen be the only person on the field conducting anything worthwhile on the offense, the odds of him getting banged up are through the roof. And it's amazing. It is literally amazing it hasn't happened sooner. And it's amazing it hasn't been more serious. Honest to God. Because not only is he doing absolutely everything on his own, but he's the toughest guy on the field, and he oftentimes does not take the easy way out. He oftentimes doesn't scamper out of bounds or slide early enough. He gets hit. He gets hit. He gets hard. He gets hit hard. So, it's another reason why things need to be figured out quickly. You cannot. Obviously, the answer right now is you got to put the game in Josh Allen's hands if you want to win, and that's the ultimate goal. But moving forward, they have got to find a way to eliminate the amount of pressure being put on Allen each and every game, because, one, it's not going to win you very many games. It's going to be very easily figured out, as we know. But, two, you are putting him in position to get hurt infinitely more than you would be if they had anybody else taking the load off of his back. Seriously. Okay. So let's feel a little bit better about the whole situation as we end the show here. By the way, if anybody's got a score update on the Rams-Cardinals game, pop it in the comments. I'd love to know. That's a hell of a game. Cardinals are for real too. Seriously. Out of the NFC, I feel like everybody forgets about them because of Tampa and Green Bay, but Cardinals are another one of those teams you think about going into the playoffs, and look out. Seriously. All right. So let's pull up the simulator. The simulator. 10-3 LA. Thanks, Andrew. Andrew Evans and Dom, my brother. Thank you. 10-3 LA. Looking forward to watching the end of that after this. Okay, so sharing the screen here as we pop into the simulator. Now, the main reason, that I was just distraught after the game last night, after everything else, was just, seeing the dude on NBC kind of break down the massive swing with the playoff implications and how that the outcome of that game wound up really factoring into it. But when you really take a deep dive into the simulator here and kind of play things out, it really, I just don't see. It would, in my opinion, it would be really, really tough for the Bills to miss the playoffs. Seriously. And I know right now things seem bleak, but I've ran through this a few times, and there really isn't any scenario that I think is plausible where the Bills wind up missing the playoffs. So let's go through this. So Chiefs, Chargers. Chiefs are rolling, man. I wouldn't want to touch the Chiefs right now. I'm glad we played them when we did. I mean, they're on fire. They absolutely pissed on the Raiders yesterday. That was embarrassing for Las Vegas. Good Lord. And the fact that they had that meeting on the middle of the field in the Chiefs stadium. I mean, you want to talk about embarrassing, get Jerry Sullivan on their ass. All right. I'm giving the Chiefs to win there. Speaking of the Raiders, Browns creeping up. I like the Browns in that one. Okay. No, this game's huge. And it all really depends on what you're rooting for. I'm personally rooting. I mean, obviously I'm rooting for a division title, but it's way less important to me than just making the playoffs. Now you'd want the Colts to win here, obviously, if you are gunning for the AFC East title. So I'll do a scenario where both outcomes wind up happening. But for right now, let's just say the Patriots win. Listen, coming up here on Sunday, the Panthers are just they had a hot start, and that was it. I mean, they are dysfunction city right now. Just fired their OC. They're all over the place. Cam Newton starting, then he's not, and then he's starting, then he's not. What the hell's going on in Carolina? Nobody knows. If the Bills lose this weekend, well, then you'd have a real reason to just toss the playoffs out of the window. But I can't for the life of me. I just don't see that happening. Sorry. Bills are winning this weekend. You can put you can quote me on it. So let's just run through here. No, I don't really care about the NFC at all. I don't care about the drudge of the league here. Who cares? So as we go through here, and I'm just picking teams that I think are going to wind up being favorited. But I'll go back and switch things up too, just so we get a really good picture of what happens here. But as we go through right now through week 15, which would be this coming weekend, based on all of this, the Bills would still remain right at the 7th seed where they are right now. And that's just if they win the game. And that's if the Patriots wind up beating the Colts. Now we get into week 16 and, there's a variety of different things that can happen to affect the way it's laid out right now. And of course it's going to look a lot different, I think, by the time the season ends. But when I just go through this, I really don't see where the Bills wind up missing the playoffs. It's a really tough outcome to land on, even though they have, what is it? Well over a 30% chance to miss. I don't know. So I've been thinking about this a lot. I mean, the Carolina game is going to be easily looked over. It shouldn't be, but it is, because we all know what's the following week, and that's the rematch with New England. I've thought about it, and, based on how the game went on Monday night, and then based on how they played the second half, I think I've changed my mind on this. I think I do like the Bills in Foxborough. I think I do. I don't know why. It's just a gut feeling, but I think that you want to talk about a game that would really ignite a fire heading into the playoffs. I think it's that, and I think this team knows it. It's their last real chance to beat a team that's even close to a contender. And not only that, you're avenging just an awful loss, and you're beating a team that is currently leading the division with an opportunity to win that division. John, I see you, brother. Johnny boy coming in. Z-Bot says exactly what I want to say in a much more epic voice. He is the Morgan Freeman of Bills enthusiasts. Scott Farrell is jealous. Great show, Z. John, you are just unbelievably kind. Just too kind. I really, really appreciate the kind words, man. Seriously. Thanks so much. We all need a little bit of encouragement and love today, don't we? And I'm getting that from you, John, and I'm feeling it. I really, really appreciate it. All right. So like I said, I don't know what it is, but I like the Bills. I like the Bills against New England in a couple weeks. But obviously we know it could go the other way, and I'll get to that in a second. So just going through here, I'm picking the teams I think are going to wind up being favorites in each game. And as we move on here, if the Bills beat New England and then the circumstances that I have played out here wind up happening, the Bills would bump from the 7th seed to the 6th seed and play in Tennessee. I would take that. I mean, not that I would take a playoff spot, but out of the landscape of teams here, I would take a Derrick Henry-less Titans team right now over probably anybody else I'm seeing on here. And then at the 7th spot, Cleveland would sneak in, which would be a pretty epic finish for them, seeing how things were looking a few weeks ago. Okay, Atlanta. I think Atlanta's going to be a sneaky tough game. I cannot lie. I think it's going to be tougher than people think, but the Bills are the better team. And I think that I got to be honest, as much as yesterday was a complete heartbreaker, I think, like I said earlier, a lot of people tuned in here, I think, to hear me riled up and bitching. And you got that from me about the refs, and deservingly so. But it is just so tough for me to be down on these guys after the second half. I mean, I know the first half existed. It did. And I won't forget that. Believe me, it was just as bad as it could get. But that almost makes what happened in the second half even more impressive, really. I mean, it was just that impressive in the second half to be able to do what they did against a team who I think right now is just flat out better than them. And they had no business doing what they did, and they wound up pulling it off on both sides. I have a bit more confidence today in this team than I did yesterday. And that's even after a loss. And I don't think running the table is out of the question. I mean, do I think it happens? I don't know. It's a tough, tall order. It is. But I do not think it's out of the realm of possibilities. I seriously don't. So I think the Bills beat the Falcons, as they should. They're the better team. But I do think that game is going to be tougher than it probably seems on paper. Okay, we'll just run through here. I think the Chiefs wind up winning out. I really do. They're on fire right now. Their schedule's not incredibly difficult, and they're motoring right now. Now this is a big game right here, because if the Colts win, I thought they would be in. Maybe it's not. Okay, based on how the things I have happening right now, I guess it's not that big of a game. Motoring through here, and you gotta love. Don't you just love this thing? By the way, I mean, how great is this? Isn't this great that you can do this? It's so addicting. I gotta say though, I hate the fact that we are doing this. I don't miss it. You know, I mean, I used to do this for hours when I was a kid. I would go through and just do any insane thing possible to try to get the Bills into the playoffs. All right. So as it stands, through what I got here on week 17, the Bills are the 6th seed against the Titans. So here we go. Week 18, W for the Bills. We're going to roll the Jets. So if we see how everything else pans out here and see how the season winds up wrapping up. Let's see what the outcome is that we wind up getting. Okay, here we go. So based on what I got here, 6th seed, it remains the same against Tennessee. And the majority of these games, I mean, what I picked was what anybody else would pick, really. I mean, I didn't really pick anything out of the ordinary. I just kind of went with the status quo here. But let's go back into these picks and switch things up and see what winds up happening. Because when I did this, there really wasn't a circumstance where the Bills wind up missing out. I even have a circumstance where the Bills lose 2 more games and still wind up making it in. So let's hit up to week 15. And let's go here and say that the Colts wind up beating New England. That would bump the Bills up in the circumstance that I have into the 3rd seed, and effectively would mean that they would win the AFC East. Now, winning the AFC East is not as difficult as it might seem right now, because I think the Colts could very well beat the New England Patriots. I very, very much think that is a possibility. And I also think the Bills are capable of doing so. So you can say that happens. If the Colts beat New England and the Bills beat New England, and then they get done what they should get done the final 2 weeks, that is an AFC East title for the Buffalo Bills, despite all the trials and tribulations that we have had to endure the last couple of weeks. it's amazing how that is still really, it is still a legitimate possibility. Now, let's say New England winds up winning that game against the Colts and they also beat the Bills. Nothing changes. Look at this. Even if the Bills win or lose that game, and this is with New England beating the Colts, win or lose against New England, it does not factor in to the Bills' playoff seeding whatsoever. If you go to week 17 and the Bills lose to the Falcons, it would eliminate them. So that's 2 losses, right? But where was the circumstance? I had a circumstance. Let's see here. If you go back and I'm trying to figure out what I did earlier. There was something I did earlier let's see. Maybe not. There is a circumstance that didn't seem like insane so let's say that the Steelers win there and then there was another Steelers game. Say the Steelers beat the Titans. No, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm out of my mind. I don't know. Maybe I was not paying enough attention. So, okay, if you want to be safe, I think there was definitely a circumstance. I just can't remember. Here we go. There's definitely a circumstance I can't remember off the top of my head. But to be safe, 100%, you have got to win 3 of 4. And if you win 3 of 4, you're in. I mean, you are in the playoffs. And the circumstances I've shown, I mean, if they do wind up running the table and the Colts beat New England this Saturday, the Bills are AFC East champs. So there's a possibility that winds up being realistic. But if you're like me, I mean, this definitely makes you feel a bit better about yesterday, because I think that this team is more than capable, despite the issues, to win 3 of 4 based on the opponents. I mean, you got Carolina, just the dumpster fire right now. You got Atlanta, who, I think they're much better than Carolina, but they're still towards the bottom of the league. And then you got the Jets, who are the freaking Jets. And we already know what the Bills have done to them this season already. So I'm telling you, man, it makes swallowing yesterday a bit easier when you look at this. And now where was the damn? I want to show this to you, but I can't seem to figure it out. There's a damn circumstance where the Bills could lose 2 and they get in. For the life of me, maybe is it this? Yes, there it is. There it is. I figured it out. Look at that. Okay, so if the Raiders beat the Browns week 15 under the same circumstances, the Bills could get in at 9-8 and play the Patriots. So there's probably more scenarios. I'm glad I figured that out because I knew there was at least one. So even that, there is a scenario where they lose 2 and could possibly get in. The overall moral of the story here is, folks, I think they're making the playoffs. And yesterday will be it'll be a complete afterthought if they get in. And like I said, I do not care about the AFC East title. I do not care about the fact that the 1 seed seemed inevitable 2 months ago, and now it's not even really a possibility. I just don't care. Get in and let the chips fall where they fall, because I think right now it's anybody's bowl to win. It's anybody's bowl to win. And all you got to do is get there. This one, by the way, brought to you by Manscaped. I am in dire need of a little manscaping, especially after last night. I'm not good. I'm not good at being very kind to myself after Bills losses. I just treat myself like ass, eat like crap. Work usually doesn't go very good the next day. Don't shave. So, we'll just blame the refs on that one. I blame the refs for me not manscaping, but I will get to it eventually. And when I do, I use the Lawnmower 4.0 because, as you know, it is the cream of the crop when it comes to men's grooming products. And, of course, it has the travel lock, the built-in LED light, wireless charging, you name it. Lawnmower 4.0's got it. And you can pick up that and many more Manscaped products over at manscaped.com using the promo code Fanatics and getting a special discount. Get on it. Christmas, my good God, 12 days away. Where has the time gone? And, man, only 4 games left. This season blew by Not that it blew. I don't know if it blew yet. And that's in that meaning, interpretation. But it flew by, whatever. All right. Hey, go watch that Rams-Cardinals game. Should be a good ending, I think. We'll see what happens. Love you, Jeff King. Right before I head out, Jeff's got one more for me. Jeff, you're the man. Folks, got to run. Merry Christmas to you and yours, says Jeff. Truly, tell your folks, family, children, and friends you love them. Tomorrow you might not get a chance again. God bless. Go Bills. Always. Bot. Love your show. I got nothing else to say. Jeff, I can't top that. You're ending the show tonight. Well said. To Jeff, to all of you, take what he said into account, because that's what it really comes down to right there. Love it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all for tuning in. Try your best to put yesterday in the rear view. Sunday's another game. See you next week. We'll talk about it then.